This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Fantasy Fanalysts podcast. Hope you had Derrick Henry and Justin Jefferson this week, because if you did, you had a fun ride in fantasy football, especially in FanDuel. Nick, how was your week?
Less than stellar. You know what's real funny though is I did have both of those guys in some FanDuel lineups. I still didn't win anything. That's the wild part about this week is I still didn't win anything because I decided to rely on guys like Jonnu Smith.
Ben Roethlisberger kind of screwed me. I had him in every lineup.
I stacked a lot of Matthew Stafford and Gardner Minshew at my quarterback position, which in FanDuel and stuff, if you don't have a quarterback that puts up a lot of points, you're not likely to win. So having
you get away with it on your tight end, on your defense, can't get away with it from the quarterback
and having
position.
relied on them, that kind of screwed me. And when it came to some of the other running back spots, I mean, I didn't really get much out of them. Obviously, Derrick Henry was good, but I tossed around guys like Myles Gaskin. I tossed around James Robinson, which James Robinson scored, but he didn't really have a stellar game. At the wide receiver position,
saved a lot of fantasy owners with that touchdown.
He did. But I tossed out DJ Chark, expecting the Lions to blow it against him. I threw out, who were some of the other names I threw out there that were just duds this week? I went Thielen over Jefferson in one of my lineups. Like I had the right people, but not always in the same lineup.
Yeah,
I think I did stack Justin Jefferson and Derrick Henry in one lineup, and it still didn't win because I didn't have the quarterback or the other running back doing well for me. And I also had DeAndre Swift in the morning and took him out in multiple lineups, which hurt. It was a very bleh fantasy week for me. I am going to end up losing my yearly league this week because while I had Justin Jefferson, and mind you, this is a league where bonuses galore, I think he put up 48 points for me this week.
Whew.
The rest of my team
lost?
And I still lost, and it wasn't even close.
Oh my God.
Like, unless Kyler Murray and Kenyon Drake put up extremely insane numbers, I don't really have a chance. But it wasn't pretty. I didn't play well this week, and I don't know. I trusted, I had Ryan Fitzpatrick in one of my lineups at the quarterback position, which in most weeks would be good, and it was kind of trending for him to have a really good week, but they took him out in the third quarter, up 21-0. So that kind of screwed me. It was a very frustrating fantasy week for that reason. I had the right guys in mind. I just didn't. And then obviously Jonnu Smith's injury hurt me on every level possible because he's been my go-to tight end in FanDuel, and he's been my tight end all year in my yearly league also. So it was obviously frustrating. A tough week. But I mean, listen to this. All right. Yeah. So Justin Jefferson puts up 47.6 points, right? Outside of my quarterback, not a single other player put up double digits. And this is a full point PPR league. Not a single one. And that's guys like Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, Alexander Madison, who I trusted in FanDuel and yearly, and he was a dud this week. Jonnu Smith, and then obviously my defense and kicker, that, it's not that surprising. But that's terrible. And that's what killed me this week.
That's a rough week, my friend.
It is.
I had a pretty decent week. I placed in the $1 million tournament thing.
Oh, I got 50 cents.
I won $7 off it.
Yeah, I won 50 cents. Yay me.
I won. I actually had a really good FanDuel league. I won one other FanDuel league. I missed by the hair of my chinny chin on the other one. But the one league I cannot figure out is that hybrid league that I mentioned a few podcasts ago, where what we do is we have your regular FanDuel league, but you also have a matchup within that FanDuel league that dictated by ESPN scheduling. So you're actually going head to head against one other person in that league, and whoever has the better score gets the win for that week. I'm top 3 in FanDuel scoring in that league, and I am about to go 1-5 after this week.
Ouch.
How?
Honestly, that's just tough breaks right there. If you're putting up
played the guy with the
numbers
highest
every
score
week.
3 times already.
Right, you're putting up consistent numbers every week. It's going to eventually come back to the mean there.
We're running out of time, Nicholas.
I know, but you're going to string to get together some wins. It's bound to happen. I mean, stuff like that happens to someone every year in fantasy where they put up obscene numbers that are top 3 or 4 in scoring in their league, and it just so happens that they get off to like a 2-3 start or a 1-4 start, and the reason is because they have the most points against in the entire league. It happens. It's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. So it eventually
making me want to start trying
back,
a roto league.
Right. It eventually comes back to the mean, though. It comes back to the mean.
Oh man, it was rough though. He had I thought I had him beat, and then he beat me on that James Robinson touchdown.
Ouch.
He had James Robinson left.
Ouch.
I was like, no.
Yeah, that'll hurt. I mean, that's type of stuff's what kills your week, you know?
Then again, I can't complain because if it weren't for Derrick Henry and Justin Jefferson in my lineup, the whole thing would have gone
true.
to crap,
I mean, that's probably true for a lot of people's lineups this week. Derrick Henry and Justin Jefferson probably carried a lot of lineups, including mine. Granted, it didn't win me anything but 50 cents. Mm-hmm. So,
speaking of Justin Jefferson, so I did want to talk about some fantasy values. Some fluctuating fantasy values this week. And Justin Jefferson was the first one I do want to talk about. So 2 out of 3 weeks now, he's exploded. Where are you valuing him as wide receiver? Is he a wide receiver 2? Like a locked-in wide receiver 2 for you now? Or where are you putting him?
He's one of those guys that has extreme upside. And I'd go as far as saying he's got wide receiver 1 upside in the right matchup. But in a bad matchup, that floor is so low, it's hard for me to say that he's a locked-in wide receiver 2. He may finish that way at the end of the year, but where his risk value is so high that it's tough to just say that he's an automatic wide receiver 2 because of the fact that his floor is straight up a goose egg because he's done that so far this year. So having a guy who, with that kind of floor, it's tough to say that he's a locked-in wide receiver 2 week in and week out. And from what I've noticed, it is entirely matchup-based with him. If he's got a good matchup, I'd start him. I'd go right after it and go at and try to get him in your lineup, and especially in FanDuel leagues because he's very cheap right now. That's a guy that I would absolutely trust in a good matchup. But in a bad matchup, I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole.
So, like, for me, just seeing him go 3 out of 4 weeks, go for over 100 yards, I'm about ready to lock him in as I believe scoring wise, he is a wide receiver in terms of amount of fantasy points scored. He is wide receiver 1. I'm just not ready to put him wide receiver 1 tier yet. For me, I think you can lock him in as a consistent wide receiver 2. I think he's finally found that connection with Kirk Cousins, and he's carved out a significant role for himself in the offense. I mean, he's outscored Thielen now in multiple weeks. So For me, he's a locked-in wide receiver.
See, the reason I pumped the brakes on him is because if you look at the matchups that he's had, where he's put up the big numbers, he put up big numbers against Tennessee, Houston, and Atlanta, and all 3 of those teams are very bad against wide receivers. They give up a lot of points to receivers. His bad games came against Green Bay, Indiana, and Houston, and Green Bay and Indiana are very good against wide receivers. They do not give up a lot of points. Houston's pretty much right down the middle. So all of his matchups against teams where he's put up big fantasy numbers. Sorry, Seattle, he had a bad game. Seattle was the game he had the bad one. It was Houston, he had a good game. But he didn't score against Houston, if I recall. Right. Against Seattle, he had a bad game, which that's an anomaly in my mind. That's a game that just didn't go the way anybody expected. But the games that he's scored have been in the where he's put up big numbers is teams that are in the bottom half of the league, and even in 2 cases, bottom 10 in the league in giving up points to wide receivers with Atlanta and Tennessee. Houston's pretty much right down the middle of the road. So in his tougher matchups, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is in his tougher matchups, he's straight up unplayable. 8 points in a full point PPR league or 7.4 was his high out against teams that are outside the top 50 or the bottom 15. So teams that are good against wide receivers. 7.4 points in a full point PPR is his high. That's not good. So again, like I said, it's in my opinion, it is entirely matchup based when it comes to Justin Jefferson. When he's got a good matchup, start him. He's got wide receiver one upside. He probably hits big for you. But in a matchup where he's drawing a good corner, a good defense, he's probably not going to score for you. And that's where I do say he's entirely matchup based. And 2 of his next 3 games are against, granted, he's got the bye in week 7, but 2 of his next 3 are against some good defenses. He's got Green Bay in week 8, where he put up a fat 4.6 and a full point PPR. And then he's got Chicago in week 10. And that's an even worse defense to have to deal with. So, yeah. I mean, obviously week 9 is a week you can look at and say, all right, he's got a good matchup there against the Lions, but those other 2 games, I'm not all that excited about for him, and he probably won't be in my lineup in my yearly fantasy, and probably won't be in my FanDuel lineup those weeks because it's entirely matchup.
It's like every other game for him. I mean, like he's got Green Bay, then he's got Detroit, then he's got Chicago, then he's got Dallas, then he's got Carolina, but then he's got Jacksonville, but then he's got
the end of the year is brutal for him with the Bucks, Bears, and Saints.
Yeah, playoff time, it's going to be a rough go. It might be a rough go for Justin Jefferson.
Right.
I'm just taking what I've seen so far, and I can't look at a guy who's been putting up top 5 wide receiver numbers and put him anywhere less than a wide receiver 2 right now. It just doesn't compute.
Well, it does when the guy's numbers are all coming in games where he's got a good matchup. Yeah. If his numbers are straight duds in games that he's got a bad matchup, there is justification for not starting him at that point, and that's why. Because
as a Justin Jefferson owner right now, are you saying going into week 8 you're not going to start him?
I will not be starting him. No.
Really?
Yes, really. Yeah, I will not be starting him week 8 unless there's injuries in my lineup that say otherwise. But I will not be just based on what he did against Green Bay earlier on in the year. That was his worst game of the year right there.
It was also his first game.
It was. It was. But I don't anticipate him putting up big numbers against Green Bay. And that's because I think that defense is better than any of the defenses he's played outside of, the better ones. Indy, right. In bad matchup games, I will not be playing Justin Jefferson. In good matchup games, he's my number 1 go-to in FanDuel at that point. So it's entirely going to be matchup based for me moving forward with him. And come playoff time, I may as well just drop his ass. And also, there is another big factor in there, and that has a lot to do with the fact that Kirk Cousins is so wildly inconsistent right now.
There's that.
His coach came out and said that if he doesn't have the interceptions drop, like if he doesn't stop the interceptions and turnovers, he will be benched. They will not finish the season with him at quarterback. And frankly, I don't even know who the backup is in Minnesota. And I tell you right now, he probably doesn't have a great rapport with a rookie wide receiver. So if Kirk Cousins doesn't finish out the season, I'll tell you right now, Justin Jefferson's value tanks.
Oh yeah, there's that factor. But so do you not really factor in the fact that, like, for example, he's played on his percentage of snaps played has steadily increased every single game. His target share has been going up every single game. Like,
it's been entirely matchup based, and that's why. It's been entirely matchup based. When you're going against a bad defense, your targets are going to go up. Why? Because you're open more. They can't cover you. When you're going against a good defense, your targets go down. Why? Because you're always covered. I mean, that's the answer to it. It's what it is. If you go up against a good defense, you will not be open as much. And frankly, when it comes to an experienced quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who has a trusty receiver in Adam Thielen, who seems to be, in most cases, impossible to match up against and impossible to cover, he is a guy that, against good defenses, I tend to lean Thielen more because of the fact that Cousins is probably going to go his way a lot more than he would Justin Jefferson, because he's one of those guys that he just trusts. He implicitly trusts on any given play. Unlike Justin Jefferson, who is a rookie, he may not have that kind of level of trust with yet.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I love what he's done for me. I love what he's done the last few weeks, and he's been awesome this year. The reason he's got wide receiver 1 numbers right now is purely because he's had a couple of huge games, not just big games, huge games. And we always are weary of the guy that his numbers are boosted by the 1 or 2 big games, and that's how it's been with him right now. Because his third game over 100 yards was a 4-catch, 103-yard performance, which is great by all intents and purposes. But that means that there was one or 2 big plays in there that may or may not. That's not something you can always replicate. So there's a little bit more beneficiary. There's a little bit more of boosted numbers in there by a big play. So again, it's a circumstance where I'm not entirely ready to say he's a lock in my lineup every week just because he's putting up wide receiver 1 numbers, because I do think they're boosted a little bit by 2 massive games, like what we saw from Derrick Henry a couple of years ago. Not last year where he was the best running back in fantasy, but 2 years ago where he finishes RB1, but for the most part throughout that year, he was pretty mediocre. He just had 3 massive games that boosted his numbers incredibly. And that's what you're seeing right now with Justin Jefferson. I pumped the brakes on him a little bit. I'm excited about him. I like what he brings to the table. I like him a lot. He's got a lot of value, but I pumped the brakes on it a little bit because I don't like what I'm seeing when it comes to the matchups. He's not one of those guys that you play any given matchup, in my opinion. Not yet.
We went to the other side of the spectrum. Terry McLaurin. His value's gone down a little bit ever since Kyle Allen took over under center. He finishes a wide receiver 65 in week 5. And a little bit better to the wide receiver 21 on against the New York Giants in week 6. Where are you valuing Terry McLaurin? You're talking about a guy who was putting up he had a couple games of close to 20 fantasy points. He was mostly flirting with 100 yards a game. And then once Kyle Allen comes under center, he has 3 catches, 26 yards, 7 for 74. How far do you downgrade Terry McLaurin, or you keep him in the same spot right around wide receiver 2 range?
I'm right on wide receiver 2 range right here. That week where he put up 3 catches for 26 yards, you got to remember he dealt with 2 different quarterbacks in that game.
Yep.
There was that factor. Plus, you have a quarterback who came into the game cold, and then another quarterback who came into the game cold in a game that they probably weren't going to be winning anyways. It was just a tough situation for a wide receiver. There was never going to be any kind of level of success there. As soon as he got the quarterback back that started the game, came in with a game plan, ready to go, was warmed up, he put up a better game, 7 for 74. Add a touchdown to that. Look what happens. He's got a big fantasy week at that point. I'm not worried about Terry McLaurin, and I said this before. He is the only real pass catcher on that team, and he will continue to be that way. He's right in the wide receiver 2 situation for me. I mean, pretty much locked in.
You want to talk matchup, though, like against the New York Giants, it's not like that impressive that you put up 7 for 74.
Yes, however, you're talking about a wide receiver 1 versus a wide receiver 2 in Justin Jefferson. There's a big difference there. The Vikings have a wide receiver 1.
I'm talking about Justin Jefferson right now. I'm talking about Terry McLaurin.
I know, but you bring up the matchup aspect. You're talking about a guy who is a wide receiver 1 and the primary target for his quarterback, regardless of who the quarterback is. Justin Jefferson's going to be the second option no matter what.
Well, yeah, Terry McLaurin's going to get the targets. Like, let's not mix that up here. It's the quality of the targets that we worry about. Then again, it's not like Dwayne Haskins was giving Terry McLaurin quality targets. So I agree with you. I keep him at wide receiver too, because it's not like the quality of targets is going to go down. And we did see the targets bump back up from last week.
Right. I also add in. I like the Terry McLaurin schedule a little bit better, and the reason is because he plays in the NFC East. It's the worst division in football with the worst defenses in football.
I mean, he's got Dallas, the Giants, Detroit, Cincy,
exactly.
Dallas again,
the matchups moving forward for Terry McLaurin are much easier. He plays in a bad division where he plays each of those teams twice a year, and the NFC North has got some damn good defenses in it. So. Honestly, I like the matchups moving forward for Terry McLaurin a lot better than I do Justin Jefferson's as well. So I keep him right in there at wide receiver 2. I said it last week and I'll say it again. I'm not worried about him.
All right, let's talk about DeAndre Swift. He had a bit of a coming out party.
Oh, I loved it.
Sunday.
Oh, as a Lions fan, it felt so good.
14 rushes for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nick, revaluing him rest of the season.
In all reality, the man had 140 yards rushing because he had 2 10-plus yard carries taken back by stupid penalties. But regardless, it's so tough to value this guy because this is only 1 week, and I don't like to overreact on the 1 week play. However, the one thing I've noticed about the way this offense is using its personnel is they go with the hot hand. And especially in the backfield. They started with AP. He seemed to be the hottest running back out of the backfield. They kept going to him and fed him and fed him and fed him, and it just didn't work. Well, then they decided to go elsewhere. They saw DeAndre Swift get hot in that game, and he was very hot, and they fed him and fed him and fed him until they had a comfortable lead and were comfortable giving him a break because he is young. He is, you don't want him to get hurt. He dealt with an injury in training camp anyways, so they gave him a break, fed it back to AP to just wind down the clock, have him run between the tackles. I'm not saying that they are, but if the Lions coaching staff is smart,
not saying that they are.
they need to stick with DeAndre Swift, and I'm just going to say I think they will, at least for this upcoming week. I think he's got a short leash. However, I think DeAndre Swift will be your RB1 in that Lions backfield week 7 from the beginning. And that's what excites me because I think this kid is a really good playmaker. So yes, I would be looking at possibly playing DeAndre Swift in DFS plays if I have him on in my lineup this week, because they've got a pretty good matchup next week. A fantastic matchup this week up against the Atlanta Falcons. So yes, I'm looking at DeAndre Swift as a guy that I can really rely on in both DFS as well as yearly.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about next week. So like in general, for me at least, I think assuming that he's finally carved a decent enough role in that backfield, I'm comfortable putting him in as a flex player, every single week for now. And then if that role starts to get more towards a feature role, then obviously move him up to at least an RB2. But like right now, as it is, I'm comfortable trotting out DeAndre Swift as a flex player for the next few weeks.
I'll tell you this right now, because I'm not going to say that he's an RB2 or a flex player moving forward. I'm not comfortable saying that. I will say this. Until he stops being a hot hand, he will be in my lineup.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Until he, because it's a situation with the Lions backfield where if he's not hot, he won't get the touches. If he's hot, he will get the touches. So right now he's hot. He's in my lineup. Week 8 may not be the same case, and he won't be in my lineup. So it's going to be entirely based on what he did this past week. He did great against the Jaguars. If he does great against the Falcons, guess what? He's in my lineup week 8. If he doesn't, he's not. Yeah. It's a short leash. But he's got, I'd comfortable putting him in as my RB2 if we're going with that.
Yeah. Let's talk Juju.
Oh, God. What a dud.
This is a guy who was drafted in the 3rd round of most fantasy drafts, and he's not really returned that level of value for
anything.
And last week and basically last 2 weeks since Chase Claypool really exploded, we're talking about a total of 6 catches for 34 yards and no touchdowns. On the season, it's not that much more impressive. He has 23 catches for 194 yards over 5 games. Sorry. Where is Juju even a wide receiver too? Is he or is he lower than that?
He's lower than that. He's absolutely lower than that. He hasn't warranted putting up the numbers to even give you that. And the reason I believe is because I think Ben Roethlisberger likes guys like Chase Claypool and even James Washington in that wide receiver 2 slot wide receiver type position a lot more than Juju in the wide receiver 1. Juju is not, in my opinion, a top-notch wide receiver. He's not good enough to be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL. He's a great wide receiver 2. But when it comes to being covered against the number 1 cornerbacks in the league, he just can't make it happen. And that's where the difference is for me. If he's got a true wide receiver 1 lining up opposite of him, Juju's great. But if he doesn't have that, and he's got guys who are wide receiver 2s on your team, your secondary and tertiary options for the quarterback, he's not going to succeed because they don't have a true wide receiver 1 on that team, in my opinion. And that's where guys like Chase Claypool...
2018, Juju would beg to differ, but yeah, recently that's what it's looked like.
Well, 2018, Juju had Antonio Brown.
No, not 2018. I don't
sure?
think AB... I don't think AB was on that team in 2018. I think his last season with Pittsburgh was 2017. But in 2018, Juju went, I believe, for 1,400 yards. Let me pull it up real quick. Yeah, he went 14-26 and 7 touchdowns.
Well, I mean, those are definitely wide receiver 1 numbers. But either way.
Yeah, since then, he's gone for 552 yards in 2019, 194 so far in 2020 over 5 games. And these are seasons where he's been the true wide receiver 1 in Pittsburgh.
Right, and that's the big difference, in my opinion, where 2018, Antonio Brown played 15 games with the Steelers. So, yes, he was there. He was there in 2018. He put up 104 catches for 1,297 yards. So there you go. There's your answer. You had a true wide receiver 1 in Antonio Brown on that Steelers team in 2018. That's where Juju excels, when he's able to not draw those number 1 corners and draw the most coverage. That's where he excels. Problem is, ain't nobody in that Steelers wide receiver room going to be drawing that guy but him. So until they get another wide receiver one on that roster, a true one, he will not succeed. I'm leaning far more towards starting Chase Claypool and James Washington over him moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, I'm big on the Chase Claypool train. I definitely thought you'd Chase Claypool over him.
I think he's a stud.
But I agree with everything you said. Like I almost hesitate to even flex Juju at this point. Like,
he's not even in my lineup. I'll tell you right now, he ain't even in my lineup.
He's become touchdown dependent, which sucks to say, but like he does have 3 touchdowns on the year. But like it's kind of the point where if you don't get a touchdown from Juju, he's not giving you the yardage to supplement that. So
no.
Moving on, last guy, Rob Gronkowski. Ever since OJ went down a couple weeks ago. So over the last 2 games, Gronk has given you 130 yards receiving and a touchdown over 2 games.
How many catches?
That's on 8 catches, 14 targets. Where are you valuing Gronk? Is he a tight end 1 going forward? Because those are tight end 1 numbers.
He's borderline because I don't necessarily believe in that work. I mean, the workload's there. I don't necessarily believe in him just yet. Just because that Bucks team in general is just such. It's weird to me like that. I don't trust the Bucks yet, and I know they played an awesome game against the Packers and the Bears. They just didn't look right, but I don't necessarily feel like I trust that team just yet because again, we don't have 100% Mike Evans, we don't have 100% Chris Godwin. So what's the target share going to be like when those guys are 100%? That's where I am kind of questioning whether or not I can throw Rob Gronkowski in the tight end 1 situation yet. Can he get you big time numbers like a tight end 1? Absolutely. He's obviously shown it the last couple of weeks, but it's not something that I trust every week just yet. So he's kind of borderline tight end 1, tight end 2 for me. He comes with a big risk factor though if you're going to trust him to be that top tier tight end for you. Yeah,
if you're going to be trying him out every week, definitely get some insurance on that because it is Rob Gronkowski after all, and he has to be able to be healthy for a full season.
I'm not even talking the health factor here. That's irrelevant in this situation just because he was practically non-existent until an injury happened.
Are you saying the risk in terms of too many weapons on that offense and
too many weapons and I just don't know if the production's going to be consistent. We have a 2-game share. I'm not overreacting to it yet. I don't entirely believe in him in that offense just yet until I see it several weeks, because again, this is a guy who was out of football last year, granted by his own choice, but I don't know that I necessarily believe in Rob Gronkowski in that offense just yet. I know it's the same quarterback, but it's a different offense, different team, and there's different weapons out in that are also going to be looking at targets. So I don't know if the target share is always going to be there for him.
For me, he's a guy that if he's available, I scoop up and plug in, and it's kind of like he's proven enough for me not to want to if he's available on your waiver wire. Actually, I don't know what percent of leagues he's available in, but he's proven enough to me where I want to play him until he proves otherwise. But at the same time, yeah, I agree with you that it's speculative at best. Like I can't say lock him as tight end 1 for us this season because again, that offense is still so hard to predict in terms of where the ball's going. It's not like he doesn't have too much competition tight end position, but Mike Evans is basically a tight end. Let's be honest here.
He's huge, and he's so good.
But yeah, I definitely am comfortable playing Rob Gronkowski at this point, especially against teams like the Raiders and the Giants.
I mean, the good matchups, yeah, you'd want to play him. It's just you go with the good matchup.
He's got a string of good matchups coming up here.
But to say that he's a guy that I can rely on week in and week out moving forward, I can't say that just yet because that's comparing him to guys like Jonnu Smith, who I didn't expect to be a lock tight end 1. And until this past week when Jonnu Smith got hurt, there's just a difference in the way that Jonnu Smith was playing and what type of role he had in that offense compared to what Rob Gronkowski has played so far this year. And that's why I just don't entirely trust him to be a locked in tight end 1 moving forward.
Yeah, but what I'm seeing, if over the next few games I'm still seeing 6 to 8 targets for Rob Gronkowski, it's not typical to get that kind of volume for tight end. So that's why I would, if this continues, I keep him up as tight end 1. But for now, I'm comfortable playing him.
I'll play him this week, most likely just because of matchup. So I kind of agree with you there. I am curious to see what his target share will be once Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are playing at 100%, though.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let's move on to waivers.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it.
I'll kick it off with a tight end.
Really?
Trey Burton, 6.2% owned. He has seen at least 5 targets in every game he's played since returning from injury. And he had a big game this past week. He went for 58 yards and a touchdown on 5 targets. I think he's carved out a nice role for himself in Indy, and it started to seem like the rotating carousel of tight ends, but ever since he came in, Mo Alley Cox has suddenly diminished, and he's suddenly been the guy. So I look to pick him up if you're in need of a tight end.
Trey Burton was a guy who I really had high hopes for with the Bears, and then he straight up just let me down. And now it seems like he's really starting to bring that value in, so I kind of agree with you.
He was basically what Dallas Goedert is right now for the Eagles.
Right.
Before Dallas Goedert was there.
I'll move forward here. Sticking with pass catchers, I'm going to go Tim Patrick, the wide receiver for the Broncos. He's coming off 4 reception, 101-yard week. This guy looks like he's stepped into the role that Cortland Sutton left behind. He seems to be the number one target for that Broncos offense. I think he's a guy you can really kind of trust moving forward a little bit. I definitely would look to pick him up for sure.
Yeah, he's had 2 straight games now with 100 yards.
Yes,
we recommend him in week 5, and yeah, I'm pressing that button again.
Absolutely.
Pick him up 2 weeks ago. He's somehow still available in almost over 80% of leagues, so I had to grab him. One guy I don't understand how he's still available in the majority of leagues, Travis Fulgham. He's my next waiver target. He had double-digit targets again. He went for 75 yards and a touchdown. There's no reason why he should still be available in the majority of leagues. He's still available in about 53%. So
he is for the until further notice the wide receiver 1 in Philly. And I don't see a reason why he shouldn't be. He's performing like a wide receiver 1. So absolutely, Carson Wentz seems to like him a lot, giving him double-digit targets week in and week out. He's absolutely a guy that should be owned in every single league right now.
Anytime you see someone with double-digit targets in 2 straight weeks on the waiver wire, you get him.
Right. Absolutely. There's a couple of wide receivers in Pittsburgh that I think are good to take a look at, both James Washington and Chase Claypool. I don't know if Chase Claypool has hit that 50% owned mark yet. Not entirely sure on that.
I can check on that.
Yeah, check on that for me. But both those guys had big weeks. Both scored. Chase Claypool, for instance, had 4 catches, 74 yards, and 7 yards rushing with a touchdown. And James Washington scored in the receiving.
Oh, yeah. Chase Claypool is almost 85%.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure. So James Washington is a guy who I don't think is at least 50% owned, and he should be because he put out on 7 targets, 68 yards, and a touchdown this past week. He's only owned in 10% of leagues. That's a guy I think you should roster, and frankly, I'd be looking at starting him even over Juju Smith-Schuster right now.
That's all I have for waivers. I know.
I got a couple running backs.
Yeah, I think I know which one's coming.
I'm going with Boston Scott for the Eagles. He finished out the season last year, putting up great numbers for the Eagles. And Miles Sanders went down with an injury, and it looks like Boston Scott's going to get the first crack at things. He's been successful before. I think he could be successful again. I definitely, if you need a running back and Miles Sanders was your guy, well, Boston Scott may fill in may take away some of that pain for you.
I'll be honest, I'm not too high on grabbing Boston Scott because the word out of Eagles camp is it's basically going to be split between Scott and Clement. But you are right that Scott has shown he's able to handle low before. Eagles love their RBBCs, and I don't think they're going to trust either one on their own to replicate what Sanders have been able to do in that backfield so far.
The reason I don't trust that is because of the fact in years past when it comes to Corey Clement, he's been nothing more than a pass-catching back pretty much every single year, even when the top running back's gone down. And that's all he's been successful at. So I don't really believe that they're going to do a true running back by committee. Maybe you'll see more passing down situations with Clement in, but I think Boston Scott's going to get the lion's share of the carries in that offense. I don't think Clement's going to get a bulk of those carries at all. And that's why I would still take a look at Boston Scott.
Well, and because the other thing I was going to say is we can take a look at week 1 when Sanders missed week 1, and Scott did out carry Clement, but it wasn't like something crazy. It was 9 carries to 6 carries. And
again,
they both contributed to the passing game, 2 catches each. But that's what I'm saying. Like I don't see them straying from that. But
didn't the Eagles get blown out in week 1?
I'm not sure what the
I don't remember, but I don't. really recall game flow going or game script going in the way of a running back. I guess not really. They lost to the Washington football team 27-17. So, I mean, you didn't get blown out, but game script probably didn't lend itself to being, run the ball. He was more successful than Corey Clement, not really by much, but he was. He was close to 4 yards a carry, and Clement was down towards 3.
If I had to grab one of them, it's Boston Scott. I'm not too excited about either. I just think
he's going to have much more of an opportunity than Corey Clement will, because even if you look at the next week when Miles Sanders did come back, he's the only other running back that got carries. Corey Clement did not. Corey Clement didn't even touch the football. So I don't really expect to see much of Corey Clement getting carries out of that backfield. But anyways, the next running back I've got is Giovanni Bernard for the Bengals. He scored a touchdown this week in his appearance. I was kind of surprised to even see him. I didn't even know he was on the Bengals. I thought he was pretty much out of football, which I never understood why a team never gave him a shot, because when he was in his prior stint with the Bengals, he was pretty damn good. And I expect a little bit of the same here. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to see about 15 to 20 carries a game, or at least 15, 20 touches a game. And I think that type of workload is enough to warrant rostering him, maybe even playing him in a flex play situation as long as Joe Mixon's out. I like Giovanni Bernard. I think he's a guy you can take a look at.
Yeah, Joe Mixon, if anyone missed it, he hurt his foot in that game, I believe it was. He did end up coming back from that injury, but there's been no indication of whether he's going to play next week or not. And Gio did pretty well in Joe Mixon's stead, so he may even... The good old Gio may be back in Cincy, so we'll see. But
I haven't missed Gio Bernard. I haven't missed him. I liked him.
Any other waivers?
Nope, that was it.
All right, let's move on to starts and sits.
All right, do you want to kick things off?
I wish we had theme music for each segment.
Oh, I know, right?
All right, my start of the week is going to be Kyler Murray against Seattle.
That's exactly who I've got.
I love attacking this.
Your starts of the week suck, by the way.
Hey, Kirk Cousins did real well. All right.
Did he really?
Yeah. With like 300 some yards and 3 touchdowns.
How many picks did he have, though? Didn't he have
3 also?
Yeah, well, that's not great.
But he still put up fancy numbers. That's all that matters.
What, 19?
Calvin Ridley did well. Hawk got a touchdown.
Yeah. Hawk got a touchdown late in that game.
But anyway, so my start of the week, Kyler Murray. He's averaging 25.7 fantasy points per game. Oh, sorry. The Seattle Seahawks are allowing 25.7 fantasy points per game to the QB position, which is second only to the Atlanta Falcons.
He put up 23.7 points. That's not that great. Sorry, I'm just talking shit.
But so I think Kyler Murray can get it done.
I think the thing that's going to help out Kyler Murray, and he's my start of the week as well at the quarterback position, is the fact that there's going to be a lot of scoring in this game, and it's going to be a battle of straight up the twin running backs. Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray are very similar in so many different ways at the quarterback position, and both are going to be looking to carry the load for their team. I think both could end up with a rushing touchdown in that game. I think both will have at least 2 passing touchdowns, maybe even one of them having 3 or 4. It's going to be a very exciting game to watch with a lot of gunslinging, a lot of quarterbacks taking off. Kyler Murray absolutely is going to have put up some big numbers in the game against the Seahawks, and so is Russell Wilson. But it's going to be a fun one to watch for sure.
Yeah.
Because he was my second start of the week. I actually have a twofer here at the quarterback position.
Exactly where
and
you're going.
And it's another matchup I expect to be very, very high scoring, and it's Matthew Stafford and or Matt Ryan. And the Lions.
I'm mad you didn't say Matthew Stafford and Matthew Ryan or Matt Stafford and Matt Ryan. Why did you change it to Matthew and Matt? Why don't you keep the same first name?
Because one goes by Matthew and one goes by Matt. What do you want me to do? In that Lions-Falcons game, there's going to be a ton of points, and quarterbacks are going to be the beneficiary of that. Yeah. Look for both of them possibly to start. Honestly, I'd straight up take the cheaper option in FanDuel this week because I think both will be extremely high up there.
Mm-hmm. I
do lean Matt Ryan
option
a little bit.
Me too, but I think the cheaper option will be Matthew Stafford.
I agree.
Based on what I've been seeing, and that's why I put Matthew Stafford as my start of the week, and I agree that I'd start either of them. And the Falcons, I just want to point out, they're allowing 367 total yards and 2.5 touchdowns to the QB position so far this season. So
now the reason I do lean Matt Ryan a little bit is because Matthew Stafford, even in good matchups, hasn't been great by any sense of the means. Really not even that good. So that's where I am a little bit hesitant, but we all know what Matthew Stafford can do. We all know who his weapons are with Kenny Galladay and TJ Hawkinson, who's looked pretty damn good. Swift coming up and making some plays as well. So I definitely think this is Matthew Stafford's game to shine for sure.
Yeah. My sit of the week at QB is Drew Brees going against the Carolina Panthers.
I have him in there as well.
Carolina's only allowing 14 fantasy points per game to QBs. They held Matt Ryan to 226 and no scores in week 5. Not to mention, I feel like Saints are going to run the ball a lot in this game against Carolina's run defense.
As they should, because Carolina can't stop the run.
Too much.
Carolina can't stop the run, and they're really good against the pass. So I agree with you 100%. My next sit of the week, though, is Ryan Tannehill against the Steelers. The Steelers are tough against quarterbacks, and the Titans, I know I've been praising Ryan Tannehill all year, and for good reason. Dude's been amazing. I just think this is a tough matchup going up against the Steelers. That defense is pretty damn good, and they tend to shut people down. Look what they did to Baker Mayfield this week. They got his ass benched. So
they did get his ass benched.
So I'm not excited as if I were a Ryan Tannehill owner this week going up against the Steel Curtain.
All right, let's move over to running backs.
Yep.
Okay, my start of the week at the running back position is going to be David Johnson against Green Bay.
Interesting.
I got two big ones, but Green Bay is allowing 164 total yards and 2 touchdowns to running backs this season. Rojo just hit him for 113 and 2 on Sunday. I think David Johnson can just continue that streak.
Speaking of Rojo, he's one of my starts of the week at the running back position. Ronald Jones going up against the Raiders. The Raiders suck against the run, and Ronald Jones is coming off of a big week against another bad run defense. So a couple of good matchups against some bad rushing defenses in the Packers and the Raiders. I think Ronald Jones is in line for another big week here.
See, I'm actually zigging where you're zagging. He's not a sit of the week for me, but I'm actually pumping the brakes on Rojo this week. I think that 3-game streak of 100 yards rushing, I think that gets broken this week.
He hits 95?
No, because I do think the Raiders are actually better than advertised against the run. I know they're a big green matchup that everyone's probably
they're one of the worst in the league against running backs
on the schedules. But if you really look at it, the first 2 games were against CMC and Kamara, and they held CMC at 23 for 97, which is going against Christian McCaffrey. I mean, you can expect that. And then Kamara, they held to 79 rushing yards, but they gave up 2 touchdowns to him. The big game they got gashed in was that Patriots RBBC.
Okay, but Andrew, you have to look at the stats that the running backs that Kamara and CMC put up. CMC was still averaging 4.2 yards a carry, scored twice. Kamara was averaging 6.1 yards per carry. He just didn't get the carries in that game and also scored twice. They can't stop anybody.
Yeah, Kamara scored. So that's what I'm pointing out here is they have proven to be vulnerable through the air against running backs, and that's not necessarily Rojo's forte. Kamara killed him in the air. He killed him in the air, but
he did. But he also averaged 6.1 yards per carry.
You look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire; they held him to
who hasn't been good since week 1.
Their last 2 weeks they've really improved in the run. They held Clyde Edwards-Helaire to 40 yards. They shut down the Bills' run game entirely. I think that this Oakland group is a little better than advertised against the run. That's why I'm not. That's why I'm pumping the brakes a bit on Rojo. That's all.
Call it what it is with the Bills' running game. It's not good. They don't have a good backfield. So I'm not even looking at that. The Patriots, Sony Michel gashed them. They destroyed them. Rex Burkhead gashed them.
The Patriots was one really bad showing, in my opinion.
Dude, they gave up 6.1 yards per carry to Alvin Kamara, and he scored on the ground twice against them. He didn't score in the passing game. He put up 95 yards receiving on 9 catches, but he also had 79 yards rushing on 13 carries. That's good for 6.1.
You're talking about CMC and Kamara. Those are 2 of the best running backs in the
Sony
league.
Michel?
That's what I'm saying.
Who the hell is Sony Michel compared to?
That is the bad game.
They've had one good game against running backs. One, and it's a bad backfield in Buffalo. One good game.
And the Chiefs.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire hasn't been good since week 1. This dude's a bust. Let's call it what it is. As of right now, is he anything better than a bust? As of right now.
I don't think he's a bust, but he's not returning he's not returning RB, what did you get?
Round
RB5,
value?
RB6. Yeah, he's not returning that level
he's not
value
returning that. As of right now, if your season ended today, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a big fat bust. Is he going to stay that way? I don't know, but I'm not liking his chances with Le'Veon Bell in that backfield also. They clearly were worried about what's going on in that backfield, so they felt like they had to bring in somebody else. I'm not liking his opportunities moving forward.
I'm very curious. That's one thing we forgot to talk about is Le'Veon Bell in that backfield and what his role is going to be. But
I don't think it's going to be huge, but I'm not really liking the opportunity. I think it's going to hurt Clyde Edwards-Helaire 100%. I don't like it.
Anyway, my other start of the week is the other side of this Green Bay game. It's Aaron Jones against Houston. Houston's allowed a 100-yard rusher in 4 games this season. Henry just gashed up for 200 on Sunday. And honestly, it should also be noted that Ingram and Gus Edwards combined for 128 yards on 19 carries against. If either one of them got a good amount of carries, they probably would have hit it for a 5th 100-yard game. This team is absolutely god awful against the run. They're allowing nearly 6 yards per carry on the season. I think Aaron Jones I think Aaron Jones bounces back in a big way here.
I 100% agree with you. I think this Aaron Jones is actually my running back start of the week. This Texans defense can't stop anybody. So I definitely like the Aaron Jones opportunities here moving into week 7. I think he's going to gash the Texans, especially considering they rely on him. And the Packers are going to look to have a little bit of a revenge game after getting blown out by the Buccaneers in this past week. So they're looking to kind of get one back here, take control, get things righted real quick. And a good matchup against the Texans is going to be helmed by Aaron Jones in this one. So I definitely like it.
Do you know our start? Move on to sits.
No, because my other start was Ronald Jones.
Gotcha. Josh Jacobs is my sit of the week against Tampa. Speaking of Aaron Jones, This is the team that just held Aaron Jones to 15 yards on 10 carries. I think this Tampa run D is legit. I think this Tampa D in general is legit. So,
which is so weird to say. Right? I don't think I've said that since Warren Sapp was on that D line.
So yeah, Josh Jacobs, I'm staying away from this week.
I agree with you. Josh Jacobs is my set of the week at running back, maybe my set of the week for the entire week. That Bucs defense is mean and awful and dirty to running backs, and I think Josh Jacobs is going to really experience that this week. So, set of the week right there. My next set of the week, though, is James Robinson against the Chargers. That defense is still pretty good. They stopped the run, and James Robinson really coming off of a bad week in all reality. I know he scored against the Lions late, but it was a garbage time touchdown, and I really don't expect to see James Robinson do much better this week against the Chargers, who are a better defense than the Lions.
Okay. All right. Move on to wide receivers?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Calvin Ridley against Detroit. I mean, it really could go either Julio or Calvin. I'm gonna go Calvin Ridley here. Detroit's a bottom 5
fruit, man.
Detroit's a bottom 5 pass defense against wide receivers, allowing 186 yards per game in the position, and they've only to top that off, they've done that only facing one elite receiver, which is DeAndre Hopkins. Outside of that, the best they've seen is Allen Robinson with Trubisky throwing to him and Keelan Cole. I mean, I don't count the one quarter that Devontae
I was going to say
played.
they played Devontae Adams
for one quarter.
I
think both JJ and Ridley are going to have a field day. Ridley especially.
Yeah, if I had to pick between one of the two, I definitely lean Ridley. I just don't think there's anybody in that secondary that can match up. I just think that was low-hanging fruit, so I didn't put it on my list. I actually have A.J. Brown going up against the Steelers. Receivers.
My favorite chart of the week is Kamara against Carolina. I thought that was too low hanging. No.
AJ Brown against the Steelers. I know I put Ryan Tannehill as a sit, but he's got to throw the ball to somebody, and I expect AJ Brown to be the big beneficiary of what is likely to be a tough week for Ryan Tannehill. I do think AJ Brown has a big game because the Steelers somehow do give up a lot of points to wide receivers week in and week out, and I think that's going to continue this week with AJ Brown's performance. Coming off a big week also. I'm
going to go the other side of the Detroit-Atlanta matchup and go Kenny Galladay against Atlanta. Their pass defense is nearly as bad as the Lions.
Still felt like it was too easy.
They've allowed 500-yard receivers on the season. It could be easily 8 because Metcalf, Lockett, and DJ Moore all finished just shy in the mid-90s. It could easily be 800-yard receivers in the season against this team. I think, and Galladay is the only guy I think that's capable on this team of going for 100. So give me Galladay.
I'll agree with you 100%. My next start of the week is actually Terry McLaurin against the Cowboys, and that's why I said it earlier. I lean on him to be successful the rest of the way. Cowboys defense is abysmal, like bad. They're not good. They're trash, dumpster fire. Insert other adjectives here. Other ways to describe how bad the Cowboys defense is. And Terry McLaurin's going to be a beneficiary of that. He is the true number one in Washington, and there's nobody even close. He's going to get a bulk share of the targets, and that's going to lead to some big points for Terry McLaurin because the Cowboys can't cover me.
Moving on to sits. I'm sitting both Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods this week.
I have them both.
Bears pass D has been super stingy. They've only allowed one wide receiver to hit 100 yards, and that's the aforementioned Calvin Ridley back in week 3. They held Mike Evans to 41 yards in week 5. They're legit. I stay away from both these guys.
That Bears defense is arguably the best defense in football right now, and they're doing it honestly decently quietly, which is kind of surprising. Unlike a few years ago where they had all those sacks and turnovers and touchdowns, this is a different Bears defense who just straight up doesn't allow yards and doesn't allow points. And it's tough to watch anybody play against them because they're tough. And they're really good on the defense side of the football, and Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp are about to find that out.
Yeah.
Tight ends?
Go for it.
All right, I've got Hunter Henry going up against the Jaguars.
Woo.
The Jaguars suck against the tight end position. TJ Hawkinson just scored against them. They give up a ton of points to tight ends, and that's going to continue this week with a legit tight end in Hunter Henry. I am not really looking forward to the Jags trying to stop Hunter Henry because he's probably going to go up for some big numbers this week. I like Hunter Henry's opportunities.
I'm going to go Dalton Schultz against the Washington football team. That team's allowing nearly 65 yards and a touchdown per game of tight ends. When you talk about the tight end position, that's a significant chunk of change right there.
That's a lot.
So I think Schultz have a nice week and probably find the end zone.
My next start of the week at tight end is actually going to be TJ Hawkinson against Falcons.
I got him too.
When we said the Falcons defense was bad, we meant it everywhere. They can't cover anybody. They can't stop anybody. And TJ Hawkinson seems to be the number 2 favorite target for Matthew Stafford right now. And that's going to continue this week. I think he scores.
Yeah. I'll add to that team has allowed 7 tight end touchdowns on the year. So I think it's. I hope.
I will say this: if there is any pass catcher on the Lions that has over 100 yards besides Kenny Galladay, it will be T.J. Hawkinson.
Yep. And you want to buy yardage? Atlanta's allowing 73 yards per game to the position, which is again significant for the tight ends.
That's huge. Sits?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I'll go Jared Cook against Carolina. Carolina has not allowed a single tight end this season to get more than 50 receiving yards, and they've only allowed 2 tight end touchdowns on the year. They're stout against the pass in general, especially against tight ends. I don't like Jared Cook here.
I don't even know what his status is going to be going into this week, but regardless, I'm sitting Jonnu Smith this week up against the Steelers. I don't even know if he's playing.
I think they said it was a minor ankle sprain, so I think he's going to be fine.
Either way,
mad that he left. If it's minor.
Same. Either way, I will not be starting him this week up against the Steelers. The Steelers are very good against tight ends. They don't allow a lot of points there, and Jonnu Smith, hampered a little bit, isn't going to help things. So I will be sitting Jonnu Smith this week.
Your bargain pick on defense. Let's see if you have another tight end sit.
I do. George Kittle against Patriots. Not a good matchup for a tight end. I know he's almost matchup proof.
That did not work out for me last week. I did.
No, it didn't. He still had a good game. Yes, he had a very good game. Which, in all honesty, George Kittle's a guy you never really sit. It's more of a buyer beware when it comes to George Kittle. When I say a guy like sit Derrick Henry, that's more of a buyer beware. It's not a guy you're ever going to sit. He's in your lineup.
Don't spend up on him in FanDuel. Basically,
right?
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So a really good bargain play. I mean, you could really play either side of this game, but I'm going to lean that the New York Giants side against Philly is going to be cheaper. And the fact that Philly, that their offensive line is allowing
like 100 sacks a game.
Yeah, they're most sacks per game in the league at 4.2. On average, they're allowing 7 fantasy points per game to defenses, and that's mainly off the sacks, to be honest with you. And it's not the Giants aren't capable of capitalizing that. They're in the top half of the league in sacks per game at 2.5. So they're plenty capable. I think they're going to be the cheaper end of this. So that's the end I'd probably pick, even though Philly will probably pay dividends as well. But I'd recommend the New York Giants here against Philly.
I'm going to go the other side of that game, and I'm going with the Eagles against the Giants. Giants give up a ton of fantasy points. Daniel Jones can't stop throwing picks and turning the ball over, and I think the Eagles will be able to force a few of those turnovers, maybe run one back for a touchdown. Like you mentioned, either side of the football in this game is going to be straight up money when it comes to looking at a cheaper option in DFS at the defensive position, because both teams give up a ton of fantasy points to defenses. So I agree with you there. I
like that side of it because the Giants are actually allowing the most fantasy points to defenses in the
they're
league.
They're probably going to be very cheap. You're not wrong.
So I do like the Philly side of it for that reason. So
yeah,
but
the New York side of it.
No, I was saying the Giants are allowing the most fantasy points to defenses. So like Philly has a golden opportunity here. So that's why I like the Philly side too. But that's why I'm agreeing with you there too.
Yeah.
You can play either side of this game.
The other defense I like is the Chargers against the Jaguars. That Gardner Minshew just doesn't seem 100% right now. He doesn't seem right. He missed a lot of throws, made a lot of mistakes, turned the ball over a little bit against the Lions, and I think the Chargers are a defense that can force a lot of turnovers, and I think that'll continue this week. Also, James Robinson really has not been that impressive in the last few weeks, so I don't think the Chargers are really going to be scared of the Jaguars' offense, and I think that they'll be able to force some turnovers in this game as well. So I like the Chargers against the Jags.
Nice. So I do want to close out one thing before we shut the show down here.
Yeah.
Let's real quick touch on the Le'Veon Bell situation. Finding himself in Kansas City. Do you think this drastically affects Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's role for those Clyde Edwards-Hilaire owners? And for Le'Veon owners, are you a little higher on him if you're a Le'Veon owner than you were when he was with New York?
This is one of those situations, in my opinion, where it's where there's smoke, there's fire. There's obviously some concern in that Kansas City front office and with that Kansas City offense that Clyde Edwards-Hilaire just isn't up to snuff. He's just not performing the way they wanted him to and expected him to. And they felt like they needed to bring in some help. They will still give Clyde Edwards-Hilaire every opportunity to succeed, but Le'Veon Bell will be waiting in the shadows to take that role away from him. And Le'Veon Bell fits into that offense like a gem.
Yes.
He's a perfect fit for that offense. And that's the one thing that scares me the most for Clyde Edwards-Hilaire is that fact right there, that Le'Veon Bell does fit so well there. So I am definitely concerned. I don't think immediately there will be a drastic change with Le'Veon Bell getting a ton of opportunities or ton of touches. But I do think as if Clyde Edwards-Hilaire doesn't turn things around, and I mean quickly, you could start to see Le'Veon Bell take away touches increasingly every single week moving forward until he takes that job entirely.
I could honestly, obviously this is from the outside looking in here, but I could honestly see immediately Le'Veon Bell assuming a third down role and taking over some goal line carries.
That for sure.
Because he does have like half a foot on Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. So he's a bigger back than Hilaire is, significantly bigger back. So I do think that immediately he can come in and assume a third down role for this team. So that being said, I think it probably reduces Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's value slightly. It does not necessarily improve Le'Veon's value because he's not going to get the volume you saw with the Jets, I don't think. But you'll probably still see those touchdowns.
I don't necessarily disagree with you there. Like I said, I just, again, where there's smoke, there's fire, and I think there's definitely a fire going on in this situation with Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. I definitely am worried about what could happen moving forward for him with Le'Veon Bell there.
Although he certainly got the message this week. He went off.
He did.
Anyway, that's all I got for this week.
I mean, he didn't really go off this week.
Who, Hilaire?
Yeah.
He went for like 100 and some yards, dude.
What am I looking at? Oh, you know what? I'm looking at an older game. I was looking at the Patriots game.
So it just happened a few hours ago.
I was looking at the Patriots game. I had the wrong week up on.
He went 26 for 161 yards.
Yeah.
That's going off.
That's going off. So, but again, I am worried about his potentials moving forward. So we'll see though. But anyways, though, that is going to close it out for this week, guys. We thank you for listening. Andrew, thank you for joining me. And we will catch you guys next week. Good luck in your fantasy matchups and in DFS, but not too much luck in DFS because I want to win some money. I'm sure Andrew does too. Check out our other podcasts if you're a Detroit sports fan. The Fan Report, also brought to you by Detroit Sports Podcast. And follow us on Twitter at Real Fan Report is where you can find us. thank you guys again. We'll catch you next week. Peace out.
Peace.